Clarity is number one issue writers face, but it's not talked about enough. Revision paralysis is we go in this endless loop or this trap, just never ending editing, rewriting over and over again till we get stuck. With this podcast, y'all, I just have so many ideas. And this topic that we're talking about today has been on my mind for a while, since some of you know the story about how long it's been taking me to get this book done, how I walked away from it, how now I'm coming back to it, and I'm trying again to get this book published. But this conversation, this topic is why a lot of writers just never get their book published, why they never get past the first draft. And then I read some numbers that were pretty scary and on my mind, and which is kind of discouraging and disappointing for the writing community. I read, and I have right here in my notes, that 95 to 99% of people who set out to write a book, they never successfully get published at all. You have the book idea, you work on it, and then you never successfully get published. And I was reading the book Story Genius, which I'm still reading right now. I haven't got really far in it yet because I literally just started reading it. And I'm trying to do at least 10 minutes a day of reading the book. But anyway, she was saying in the first page, actually, that a lot of writers, mainly the only people that actually read their books is their family and their friends. And a lot of times they can barely get anyone else to read it. And another scary statistic I read, that 97% of people never even finish the first draft at all. And a lot of writers don't even get to the second draft of their book. And what makes it even crazy, that about 3% of writers actually get to the next stage of their writing, actually get to the second draft of your book. So I'm just saying to the writers right now, just a little bit of encouragement this morning. If you made it to second draft and you're still struggling, trying to get through the process, I would just say you're doing such an amazing job right now. You should be so proud of yourself. You should be so grateful, because you are part of the 3% of people that actually move on to the next draft of the book. And you should be so proud of yourself. And I know, especially being someone in my shoes and each other's shoes, it could be really, it doesn't feel rewarding. It doesn't feel like you're succeeding, because you've been working on this draft for so long. You've been stuck with this book for so long. And when you look at the second draft, you see all the flaws of your book, and you're like, oh my gosh, this book is not even worth reading. It's not even worth publishing. Nobody wants to see it. I would just be so proud of yourself that you made it this far on your book journey. Looking at those numbers, a lot of us are asking ourselves, why do 97% of writers never get to the next stage? Why they get stuck in revision mode? Revision paralysis is a term that is not talked about enough in the writing community, y'all. I'm telling you, I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because I just feel like it's just something that writers don't talk about enough. Revision paralysis is when we go in this endless cycle, this endless loop, or this trap a lot of writers fall into. Is just never ending editing, never ending analyzing, never ending rewriting scenes or sections of the book, to the point where we do it over and over again till we get stuck. And then you end up like me. It's been many months stuck in the second draft mode. Ever since I have finished the first draft and reread it again, I have been stuck in that cycle until now. I feel like I'm getting out of that cycle from my own experience, that when you get to the next draft of your book, especially the second draft, you already know the first draft is messy. Everybody already knows that your first draft is crappy. And it was also, getting through your first draft was hard enough alone. But then when you get to your second draft and you start revising it and you just start editing, you start to see all the flaws of the book you fell in love with. Your dream story idea just may not be as well written or as crystal clear, perfect as you want it to be, as you imagine it to be. When I started doing my revisions, I became so discouraged. I began to think to myself, no one's going to read this book. It's so trash. What the heck was I thinking when I set out to write this book? And then I feel like when we start thinking that way, we all fall into the trap of perfectionism. Now we get so obsessed with making sure our story is readable that we forget that the second draft isn't the final draft of the book. We forget that there's a third draft, there's a fourth draft. Sometimes there's even a fifth draft or even a sixth draft for a lot of writers. And then we get stuck with thinking, oh my gosh, this book has to be perfect. We're so worried about what the readers think and what our potential buyers think, that we get this loop of perfectionism, that we get stuck and rewriting our drafts all over again. Rewriting our first draft over and over again, because we're just so worried about what other people are thinking, instead of focusing on how can the story logically make sense. And I feel like we fall to this loop of perfectionism because we're so worried about the fear of judgment. And I think another thing too is that a lot of us writers, we try to avoid the vulnerable moment or the reality that our books are not that great. Our story ideas are messy, flawed, and need a lot of work. There's so many plot holes, so many incomplete character arcs that we just don't want to face the reality that our stories are kind of messy, and we're going to have to, I'm not trying to say that they're trashy or messy, but it's just hard to face the fact there's a lot of work to be done to make this story from just a messy, unstructured idea into a well-crafted, beautiful story. I just sometimes feel like revision is seen as productive. Have you ever heard of saying procrastination disguised as productivity? And I just feel like revisions are that way sometimes. It feels like you're doing a lot of work when you're scheduling deadlines, where you're busy trying to re-outline your book for the 50 millionth time, where you're too busy trying to craft that beautiful character profile, trying to find Pinterest photos for your characters, and just spending so much of your time world building, creating this fantasy sci-fi world that it feels like you're doing the work. When we do that, sometimes we're avoiding the real problem. The real thing we need to do is just getting the book written. Yes, I feel like it's very important to set deadlines, to create a better character art, and to create an outline. But I feel like a lot of times we try to avoid hard tasks, and maybe you need to like re-outline your entire book again, or maybe your characters are very flat and you have to start all over again with rewriting them. You probably had to kill off your darlings, delete scenes from your book that don't work at all, but you're in love with them. And it just so, and delete, get rid of plot moments that just don't make sense for the story. I think another reason why we get so stuck is because we lack clarity. And that's something that I've started to realize too, just looking at my own work. What is the story supposed to be about? But I think also we lack clarity on who our characters are, their internal conflict. What do they want? And what do they fear? And what is the lie they always believe? I feel like I have an idea of what their character voice is, but I'm still struggling to figure out who their character voice is. And it makes it really hard to keep showing up consistently and getting the ideal structured book down when you have no clarity at all, even with the plot too, the outline. And I know a lot of us are pantsers, some of us are pantsers, we're discovery writers, we just write whatever we feel, but sometimes I feel like it's really helpful to have an outline, even if it's just a short outline. I don't have to be so detailed. Some people are super detailed with their outlines, but I just feel like everybody needs a quick little outline to guide them along with the story. You don't have to do word for word what's going to happen, but like a backbone, a guide to show you where to go. Also, I think we're trying to do too many things at once. We're trying to fix the characters this day. The next day we try to fix the grammar. The day after that we try to fix the outline. We try to fix every problem once. Once we get through writing our first draft and we come back from our 3-month, 6-month break from the store, we come back and we see all the problems wrong with our book, and we just get perfectionism stuck in our head, y'all, that we try to fix everything at once. We go in this panic mode. That's what I like to call it. You go in this little panic mode and you try to fix every at one time. I gotta fix this. This character is so flat, or this plot, this third act doesn't make any sense. And when you try to do everything at once at the same time, you get nothing done. It reminds me of that saying, if you chase 2 rabbits at once, you end up catching none. And I feel like we get so scattered in how to fix the problems and how to put out all the fires that we end up getting more confused, more discouraged, more burnt out, that we don't even want to look at our story anymore because we feel like, man, I really suck as a writer. I don't know where to start to fix this book. This book is so trash. It is so messy and garbage. I cannot work on this book right now. It's just, we put it off to the side and we don't look at it anymore. And we come back later, try to fix it. We get overwhelmed and then we put it back, and then we do the same cycle over and over again. Look, I'm going to be honest with y'all. Sometimes I ask myself, am I the only one that just can't get out this draft loop? And sometimes it does feel embarrassing when you admit it to your writing community. And then when your family and friends know that you're writing a book, that they ask you, hey, how's that book coming? Are you almost done with your book? When are you going to get published and all this stuff? And it's like sometimes, y'all, it just be so embarrassing. I'm like, yeah, it's coming along. It's almost there. We're getting close. You know, we're getting to the end of the book. And you don't want to tell the truth that, yeah, I kind of deleted the second draft and I start all over again, even though I spent almost 5 months working on this draft and I'm doing it all over again. And then you're like, what? I thought you were getting close to being done. Why is it taking you so long? And sometimes people ask you that. Why is it taking you so long to get this book done? When are you going to get it done? I feel like every writer has their own struggles, has their own process of completing their work. And then you try to ask yourself, am I literally the only one that has rewritten my book again? Because you had to feel that embarrassment or that weird feeling like, man, maybe they're right. Maybe I should be done by now. And you ask yourself, am I the only one that's going through this struggle? And I was here to tell you, no, you are not, not at all. Especially people that do their first draft. I think I did my first draft at least twice before, because I was just playing around with it. I would say it was draft 0 for me before I really sat down and did the first draft. But I feel like a lot of writers, they redo drafts over and over again. I genuinely just don't think a writer does this first draft, move on to the second, and then the third. There might be some that actually do that for real, but I feel like at least every writer, even the most well-known writers, have probably went over their drafts a million times. Well-known writers, they do 6 to 10 drafts before they say, hey, it's ready to be published. I'm ready to show it people. But that's not the question. The question is like, is it weird that you rewrite the same draft over and over again? I feel like no, it's not weird, but I feel like at some point you got to ask yourself, what is holding me back from getting this draft done and saying that it's ready? What am I not understanding, or what lack of clarity I have about the story that's making me not want to move on to the next phase of getting my book done? One thing I learned is that you had to tell yourself, we have got to stop redoing this over and over again. We have got to figure out what the main problem is, and let's set a deadline to fix this. And let's set a deadline to actually start to write a draft and set a deadline to actually finish any draft. I'm telling you, that helped me get the ball rolling, momentum going for my second draft right now. I feel like this second draft, I know I'm telling you right now, this is not going to be my perfect draft. But I know this draft is going to come out so much better because I sat down and got a little more clarity. I set a deadline when I'm going to prepare for it, when I'm going to start writing it, and when I'm going to end it. So when we end up in this never-ending loop of revision paralysis, there's this question that I feel like a lot of us ask, and I myself even ask, how long is too long to be writing and working on the same book? Is it weird that you spent more than 3 years, 10 plus years or whatever, working on your book and getting no work done? We all know there's famous authors out there. They spent years working on these stories. I just feel like there's no universal timeline or the perfect timeline to get the book done. It just depends on you, the book, and your goals as an author. I mean, I know this kind of sounds unrealistic, but let me just dream, guys. Let me dream. I want my book to be done at least with the 4th draft by the year December. I really want that because I want it to be published and put in people's hands in 2027. I want to do it in the spring of 2027, just have it ready for someone to buy. And I know that may sound too unrealistic for some people, but that's what I want to do. But like I said before, it really just depends on the writer. I don't think there's no right or wrong answer to that question. I mean, it's so real. But to me, there are signs. Maybe you've been with this book a little too long. Maybe you need to work on something else or step away from it while working on another project, I would say. So these are the signs I have noticed for myself, is when you dread working on your book. You dread every day. You try to be consistent with your writing and show up every day like a good writer would. But then you're like, man, I really don't want to write this book today. I'd rather do any other story than this story right here. I don't care about the world anymore. I don't care about the plot. I don't even care about the characters. I'm just going to power through it. And then when you try to power through it, you kind of write okay, mediocre stuff. Sometimes a little work that you're not even proud of at all. It's kind of like, messy. And you just walk away dissatisfied. That's definitely a sign that it's too long with this book. When you're outgrowing the theme or the idea of the story, just imagine that time, y'all, where you were obsessed with this story idea. You were like, oh my gosh, I love this story idea. This idea is just so popping. I remember when I first had this story idea, y'all. It was during the pandemic, around the pandemic era. But I was so excited. I was like, yes, I can't wait. Because I was in middle class when I had this idea in school. And I was like, man, I can't wait to go and practice this out, try this story out. And then over time, you start to feel like I'm trying to find ways to hold on. But You just feel yourself slipping and you try to find many ways to follow up the story, which I do think there are ways to fall back in love with your story, but I'll talk about that later, maybe another video. But there are ways to fall in love with your story, but at the same time, they're like, you fell out of love with it, you're not excited about the idea anymore. It's just like, the spark is gone. The fire is starting to die out for this story. Overworking your prose until it breaks. You're trying too much to edit. You spend too much time trying to fix the problem. You're just rewriting to avoid judgment. You're not rewriting because you feel like the story could be written a little bit better. You're worried about what other people are thinking. When I finally reached that point where I'm just so sick of being stuck in this revision paralysis loop, I was like, how can I get out of this loop? And one of the first things I did was just change my mindset. And one of the mindsets that I did tell myself is that the first draft is messy. It's just you told the story to yourself. The second draft, you're just seeing you saw the problems in the first draft and you're just trying to make it a little bit better. And the second draft is not the final draft. And there's still plenty of room for improvement. And that's what I try to tell myself, to give myself a little hope, take a little pressure off myself. The second draft we're still working on, it's still work in progress, not the final draft, not the official draft. Yes, I might get feedback from beta readers that I may not want to hear, but at the end of the day, that feedback is going to make my story so much better. Imagine if I didn't get that feedback and I put it out there for the world to read, and I get the feedback from readers and buyers that I do not want to see. Another thing I did too, stop fixing while drafting. I remember when even now, I was writing a couple chapters and I was like, man, I really don't like that. And I was just tempted to go back and try to fix it. But I was like, whoa, that will slow us down. And I was like, instead of stopping the book and trying to go back, research, and insert it into my draft, I was like, Hannah, make a note. And I feel like that's one thing you have to do, is just make notes for yourself. I use my Notion and I have it in a table view of all my chapters I'm writing for today. I have my chapters laid out on my Notion, and I have a section a column on the table where I put notes. And instead of going back and trying to rewrite and fix that chapter, I put it as a mental note, like, okay, Hannah, we gotta come back later and fix that. Because my plan is, at the end, when I finally get all the chapters written, I'm gonna go back and fix those problems later. And that's how I keep the ball going rather than just stop in the middle. Because when you stop in the middle of a draft, it slows down your progress and keeps you forever stuck in that draft. One of the things that helped me too is that, especially when you're struggling to move on to the next scene, next chapter, is that I just open up a Google Doc that's blank and I just write. I even do a different font too. I do not like a formal font for a book, so I could take all the perfection, all the inner critic thinking out of when I write it. And I like to take strategic breaks. I like to do weekends. I don't look at my book. Give myself a break, step away from, because if you work on your draft all the time, I feel like you get burnt out and fatigued. And there's going to be times where you just lose creativity, the creative spark for the story or the draft. And that's why I just take the weekends away. But before I take the weekends away, I try to make sure I outline at least the next few chapters for the next week. Or I just write notes to myself, okay, how are we going to start this book? How are we going to start the next scene, next chapter? And I try to never, ever finish a chapter and then leave the next chapter blank. Let's just say I finished chapter 9. I try to at least write the first sentence of chapter 10 before the next day, you know what I mean? So I can have a head start to give myself a little push. So I won't start with a blank page. I have a starting point. And another thing I tell myself, Hannah, you are still learning. You're not an expert. You're still trying to figure it out just like everybody else. Not everybody knows what they're doing. You don't have to be the writing expert right now. And that's what takes the pressure off me when I tell myself, Hannah, you're still a student learning the craft. And I know one of the things a lot of times we ask ourselves, how we know that the draft is done, is perfect enough, because sometimes done is better than perfect. And I remember it was like a while back, I forgot the name of this YouTube channel. They were interviewing this guy and he said there's 6 essential questions that the book has to be able to answer. And the questions are, I have it right here. The questions are, well, who is the protagonist? What do they want? Why can't they get it? And what do they do about it? And why doesn't that work? And then how does it end? And he said, if your book can't answer any of these questions, and he's like, you may not have a real story done. You may not have a clear draft. So I would just use those questions as a clear indicator the story is done enough. The draft is done enough. I feel like this conversation could go on for so long. I feel like we could sit here for an hour talking about this, but I don't want to yap your ears off. But I just want to say that if I had to give one more encouraging thing to say that I have used it from my own experience is this mindset. I'm going to say it again. I'm just going to annoy you, but I'm going to say it again anyway. The mindset that I am trying to hold on to is that if all these famous authors, I would just tell myself that if they can do it, so can I. If they can do it, so can you. To me, those people are proof that the dream that you have can become true. That's my mindset for 2026 this year that I want to carry throughout the rest of the year, not just this year, but my rest of my life. But anyway, guys, that's the end of today's chat. I have been enjoying this chat with y'all. This has been a really good conversation, guys. And I look forward to so many other conversations. Let me know in the comments below what other things you want to talk about and where are you at in your stage of writing? I want to know, are you on your first draft, second draft, third draft, or are you about to be published? That's all I want to say, guys. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week, rest of your day, whatever. And I will see you all in the next episode. Bye.